Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders, joined as always by Nick Farabaugh. And just on the heels of Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin's pre-draft press conference, which I was able to attend today at Heinz Field, we're kind of going to talk a little bit about what we got out of that and what we think the Steelers are going to do when the draft starts this Thursday. In particular, we've talked a lot about what we think are good options and what their needs are, but we haven't really done a lot about what we think they're going to do. And after getting a chance to talk to Colbert and Tomlin, that's a pretty good time to do it. So, Nick, what was your big takeaway on what you think the Steelers' plans are after listening to those two talk for about 45 minutes this morning?
Yeah, I think the big vibe was when obviously Colbert said we're open to anything, but when specifically he was pressed about the running back position, and he said he was not against that. It's more about what the player brings and who they are. It gave me a big vibe, especially with how he was talking about the O-line. It's deep. He said linebacker, it's deep. He said corner, it's deep, right? And he did say running back was deep too. So let's not forget about that. He did say running back was a deep class, which I don't agree with. I don't think it's a very deep running back class, but clearly the Steelers do. But it gave me Najee Harris at 24 is kind of like still my top pick. And it's because of the way he described that running back position. Again, they view it as a thing of value. They're not up to the modern philosophy that, it's less valuable. So I came out of that with, well, Najee Harris, and Najee Harris is as strong as ever. He doesn't have medical questions, doesn't have character issues. They said the pro days were going to be bigger than ever. They were at his pro day not once but twice. They sent Eddie Faulkner the second time around. I think he kind of lines up beautifully with everything that they talked about with worries. He played in 2020. He put out really good tape. Najee Harris, I think, checks all the boxes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I took out of that as well. I mean, there was a pretty lengthy conversation there about the value of running backs, and Kevin Colbert pretty vehemently saying that he doesn't ascribe to the notion that a certain position is just not valuable enough to take in the first round. Should have pressed him on that. It's like, well, would you take a kicker in the first round? But he didn't. He said that if you can be a difference maker, you can be a difference maker at any position. It doesn't matter. I think to me that's a pretty strong signal that they're at least considering taking a player like Harris. And I do agree that it just seems like everything they're talking about, he seems to be the guy that fits all their boxes. I asked Tomlin and Colbert about the importance of college relationships, and obviously, they've seen these guys one time, and even their scouts didn't really get to go to many college practices at all this fall, and for games they weren't in the press box, so they were maybe out in the stands. They weren't getting to see players on the sideline, and so they don't have that many personal interactions with these guys. And I think that makes the Steelers' tendency to kind of go for those Power 5 big football players even greater in this year, because you really have to trust the staff that you're going to be talking to about them being honest with you about that player. And there's no reason for Nick Saban to lie and say a guy is what he isn't. That guy has 50 guys in the NFL, maybe. I don't know, probably more than that. So it's no skin off his back if Najee Harris goes in the first round or the second round. He's gonna there, and Kevin Colbert and the Alabama staff have a long relationship. They hired Carl Dunbar out of Alabama. They've got at least 2, maybe 3 Alabama grads on the roster, and Isaiah Buggs and JC Hassenauer, I know, come to mind. There might be a third one. And so to me, I think that just says this is a place we're comfortable taking a player from. They went to his pro day 2 times. He does have a bit of an injury concern. I mean, I don't think anybody thought it was a long-term injury, but he did get banged up, so he wasn't really a full participant through the process. But man, that's maybe the only thing that you could say that of all the things they've talked about that would give them pause about drafting a player, he has.
Yeah, exactly. I think the third one you're probably thinking of is Minkah.
Yeah, there you go. Minkah. They traded for Minkah, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So Alabama, that used to be a thing where people were talking about they won't take Alabama players, and then it's kind of changed course. That was like a thing before, Dunbar came on, and then now they get a Bama player every year. It feels like, whether that's in the UDFA process. They've signed a number of Bama guys off the street too. So that's no problem. With Nick Saban, obviously. And I think Najee, and I said this, I didn't get the vibe that they were taking Najee Harris because running back was a huge need. As I believe Kevin Colbert when he says it's wide open. I very much do. It lines up. All of his comments do. If Najee's not there at 24, I think they're plenty okay with taking another position. So
Yeah,
if
I
he
don't
does,
necessarily think it's running back. I think it's Najee Harris if he's there.
yes, I don't think I would put money down. It's Najee. I don't think ETN would be the pick at 24. I don't see it. I just, yes, they were at his pro day. Yes, they really trust the Clemson staff, but ETN doesn't fit what they usually look for in running backs, and he's not a great pass protector. And listen, they talked about how they had 4 veteran backs. I continue to say I think the Steelers do at least like Benny Snell a little bit more than we do, and I think they still have hope for Anthony McFarland. I don't think it's completely barren to them. Kind of how the tackle position is. Again, Colbert said that they're okay if they had to play a game today, they would be okay playing the 5 they have there. Obviously, they're going to add to that. But that's kind of the thing. I think it's Najee, and I think they view him as a pure talent, potentially BPA. That's why I think Najee Harris is the most likely pick at 24. But again, if he's gone, I don't think it automatically goes, well, number 2 is ETN. I don't think that. I think that, JOK makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about this later. With how they talked about linebackers today, JOK he's right there with them. I think corner, I think Asante Samuel Jr. is definitely a possibility. And I think a guy like a Leatherwood, an Eichenberg, someone like that at tackle, and maybe even Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson at 24. I mean, I just think it's Najee Harris. I agree with you. I think he's the guy that they're in on.
Yeah, and I think if he's not there, that's when trading back seems like a real possibility. I mean, Colbert was pretty expansive in talking about what it would take to trade down. I mean, he kind of flatly dismissed trading up as like, I don't think that's very likely. But then when asked about trading down, he kind of laid it out. He's like, well, if we're going to move back 5 or so picks, we want to make sure there's 5 guys there we're comfortable taking, but, so that we can't lose. But and he also said, well, we're not crazy about making that trade within the division, but we can't let that make our decision for us. There are obviously 3 picks behind them, and the first 8 behind them are owned by Cleveland and Baltimore. But man, I mean, for him to just flatly dismiss trading up and then kind of go into that much detail about the prospects of trading down, that makes me think if Harris isn't there, that's really a solid possibility. And maybe if it's no Harris and no JOK, okay, then what now? All right, if Dickerson and Humphrey and Leatherwood and Eichenberg and Jenkins and Cosme and Mayfield and all those other guys that have been mocked to this team, 10 of them or something, Samuel and are all there, then why wouldn't you trade down 5 spots, right? Because you're not going to get 2 of them. You may as well get something for getting 1 of them. And so I think that's certainly a possibility. In fact, I might call it the second most likely possibility, because I don't think JOK is going to be there at 24. I think maybe the second most likely possibility right now after drafting Harris.
Yeah, I mean, he flat out said, if we're not confident with the guys at 24, we will trade down. I mean, he straight out said that. And then as he went on, that statement grew with support. I mean, it's not like that's out of context either. I mean, it's a very, very, I think, likely possibility that they do it. And, I can't get JOK at 24 is something I don't know if he's going to be there. Because we've heard recently kind of the rumblings that Zaven Collins might go earlier than we think, and then Jamin Davis comes out of nowhere and he's getting mocked teams like Washington. So like I don't know how this linebacker class falls. Like, where does Parsons fall with the character concerns? Like, I don't know. And that's something that I think we're going to have to see play out. And the question that I would ask, I guess, and the one thing that's kind of making me with JOK. I think because you kind of look at what Colbert said, high IQ, lateral agility, coverage ability, and they talked extensively about like Shazier and Devin Bush and kind of how those are the guys they're looking for when they're drafting guys, and it's supported with guys like UG3 that they've drafted recently, that kind of have those traits. So I think they're looking to add a coverage linebacker in this draft at some point. I think they're definitely, especially with what we've kind of seen them do with Olszewski going kind of over the map, and they're meeting with a lot of these inside linebackers. Went to a lot of pro days like Ohio State. They were there for Parsons. They were there for McGrone. They were there for Dylan Moses from Alabama. There's a lot of possibilities here that they could do. JOK, if he and Najee are both there at 24, who do they take?
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a 50-50 toss-up because they are going to go BPA and they view both of those positions as needs. I definitely believe that. I don't know if they would go Najee or JOK. Like, that's one scenario that I think is possible, and I don't know which way they would go.
Moving down the board, I mean, Kevin Colbert said he thinks it's a deep class at center. He said he thinks it's a deep class at tackle, a deep class at linebacker. I mean, he did also say it's deep at running back, but does it feel like if they get Harris in the first round, there's a sort of consensus area for that second round pick? I mean, my feeling has been that center makes the most sense in the second round for them, but I don't know, did you get anything out of what he said today that maybe gave you a lean one way or the other for what they're thinking at 55?
Well, I think I've leaned center too, but again, he said it's a deep center class. Now, I don't think they'll leave day 2 without a center. I don't. So I think it's either going to be round 2 or round 3, but he did say, it's an okay tight end class. So maybe Frymuth is there at 55. I don't expect him to be there, but if he's there, I think they'll pick him. But if you kind of look across the board, if there's a guy like, I don't know, a Tyson Campbell or Eric Stokes, if Asante Samuel Jr. somehow falls to 55, this is one thing we haven't mentioned yet. I don't think they like the corner room that much. He called Lane and Pierre ascending young talents, but then Tomlin didn't speak with a lot of fervor behind the two. Although I think they clearly, as they've said,
he said Pierre passed him, but I'm not sure if it was because he was better and Lane was worse. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of that group.
Yeah, so I don't think they like the corner room, and
I'm not sure how you could.
Yeah, exactly, right. And they did say it was a deep corner group, but I do think that corner in round 2 with Stokes, with Samuel, with Campbell, with Robinson, guys like that could be there. Molden, Holland, like all these guys that could be, safeties, corners, slot corners, around those types. I think corners are an interesting possibility at 55. I definitely do. But I didn't really get a vibe at what they're going to do past that point. If they get Najee at 24, they could go linebacker too. Pete Werner,
Moses Browning could be a 55 possibility, I think.
Nick Bolton.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few possibilities they could go. They could even, if they wanted to, they could go edge at that spot. I think if a guy falls down the board, like an OA or someone like that is somehow there. I wouldn't expect that, but if he's somehow there, maybe they could attack that position. So they could go a number of different areas. With Najee at 24, they could go tackle. If one of their guys is there, like a Leatherwood Falls, a Eichenberg Falls, Radins, Brown, Spencer Brown, that is. Tackle's a possibility. I think that's a wait to see how the board falls, and we'll play it by ear.
Yeah, I didn't really get a strong sense one way or the other, but I'm still kind of leaning on what you said there. They can't go very far without getting a center. I think that's the one position that they should feel that way about, and whether they're comfortable with. I mean, I think I'm more comfortable with Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland than I am their situation at center or tackle or corner, probably, just because there's the combination of experience. Like Benny Snell has played many games where he's been the running back where Connor was out, and he's done fine in some of them. Like he's not like he's shown his like a complete inability to be a decent running back. So I don't think, and they have Jalen Samuels there too. So they've got 3 guys that, any given day playing two of those three guys is not going to be the worst situation on the team right now.
Yeah, and I will say this: the way they structured the pro days, like how he laid that out, it wasn't. They didn't go to Clemson pro day or Alabama pro day, in my opinion, because Najee Harris and Travis Etienne were there. They just so happened to be there with guys like Jackson Carman, Amari Rogers, Landon Dickerson, Dylan Moses, Patrick Surtain, like Leatherwood, right? Like they just happened to be there. They specifically went to Bama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, because they, Florida State, Auburn, whatever, wherever they went this year, they went there because they said there was talent everywhere. So they didn't send Tomlin Colbert to Zaven Collins' pro day, for example, because, well, they didn't want to go. It was a pandemic restriction, essentially, is what they said. So I will say this: if there's a year where maybe they break the bread on, the pro day thing, and they kind of, because they said they got good info from over 100 Zoom calls, I think is what Tomlin and Colbert said. Maybe we get a pick at 24 and they didn't go to their pro day if, Anaji's gone, and then JOK's gone. Maybe a Caleb Farley or a Greg Newsome or someone like that, if they're there. Yeah, Jenkins, Zaven Collins as well, obviously. These are all guys where they sent at least a position staff member, and I think that was kind of their proxy, a Javonte Williams, maybe even a trade back scenario, where they kind of sent their position coaches out to scout them instead of sending Tomlin Colbert.
Errol Austin,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean Trayvon Moehrig, right? They sent Austin to that pro day, so there's possibilities maybe with perhaps breaking that trend of pro days.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a possibility of that, but I don't know. I think I have a hard time seeing it being a pick like a Zaven Collins, where like nobody has any depth of history with Tulsa, with their staff, with taking players from there before, to have a comfort level of taking a guy from that school in a period of limited information. Now, like if it's, well, they didn't go to, Virginia Tech this year, but they've got a first round pick from Virginia Tech on their roster, and Tomlin's, from the state of Virginia, probably knows the entire coaching staff. Like that's a little bit different. I have a hard time seeing them, like Tevin Jenkins. Yeah. Oh, it's like it's not like they've never taken a guy from Oklahoma State before. I mean, there's two on the roster right now. So like I can see mining those relationships and leaning on those relationships in those instances where, okay, maybe there was only one guy to really go see. So Colbert and Tomlin aren't going to go there. Can I see it happening with a Tulsa? See, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, but I definitely think Jenkins could still be on the board for them at 24. And I don't necessarily think that it's got to be a Colbert Tomlin pick. I don't think that's a thing. I think it's mostly that they go to most of the players that they think they're going to take in that position. It's just so happened that they've taken them all. I don't think they've sat there in their draft day war room and said, well, we didn't go to his pro day, so he's off the board. I just think that they've been pretty good at getting to the ones they think they're most likely to be drafting. And so if it happens at some point, I don't think it's some kind of like, oh, well, they didn't go to his pro day, so cross him off the list. It may happen at some point. This may be the year.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the selectiveness that they mentioned of,
I think Colbert said earlier in the draft process, they usually get to about 12 or 13, and they only went to 9 this year. So there you go. I mean, it's already, some bit of that creeping into the process.
Yeah, and you kind of look at the ones they've gone to over the years before. They've gone to places like Houston, with like William Jackson the third there. So they would usually go out and scout probably a guy like a Zaven Collins. They would go there and maybe see him so they can have the in-person thing with the guy from like Tulsa, where they don't really have that connection. Or they'd go to, a place like they probably would have definitely been in Oklahoma State, I feel like, if it had not been a pandemic year. I definitely think they would have gone to see Tevin Jenkins. Like that definitely seems like something to me. Like I think they would have been in Virginia Tech, that if they would, like Divine Diablo was there too. So was Darisaw. Like there were multiple guys there. They could have gone. They just didn't get there. this year because, again, the pandemic restrictions. So, I mean, yeah, they're definitely easy targets you can see. Well, they didn't go there, but they probably would have been there. So, yeah, it could definitely break the trend. And certainly past round one, I think, is maybe where you don't bet as much on, these pro day things. I think they might take some guys from Florida State or from Ohio State or Alabama, but that's where they might deviate. Tomlin and Colbert don't have to be there. It can be a guy like Austin or Adrian Clem obviously went around to some of the smaller school guys. Like he was there at Radins, his pro day. I think he was also there for Miners. He was there for Brown. So that's where you can kind of break that trend. But they also, I'm kind of interested this year. They don't really draft a lot of Pac-12 guys. They weren't out on the West Coast almost at all this year. So I do kind of wonder if they target anyone on the West Coast. And we really don't have many indications of any interest from the West Coast because they just don't go.
Well, the one guy that kind of fits positionally, which is the tackle Walker Little, he was an opt-out, and Colbert was again pretty demonstratively saying that if we have an even grade on two guys, we're taking the guy that played. We think it's hard to step away from the game for a year and get right back into it. So that quote was actually more telling than the first one because he kind of gave some reasoning, right? It's not just like, oh, we don't like these guys because they opted out, boo. That he thinks there's like good there's some solid reasoning behind the idea that these guys that did not play in 2020 might struggle. And so Walker Little, who's 26, I think I saw on the PFF big board. So like should be right there. We haven't seen a mock to them. They didn't go to his pro day. Like, I don't know. To me, I think he's maybe off their board or certainly not showing any interest in him.
Yeah, I mean, but they're the thing that's interesting with that is there's a number of guys, specifically at DB, that I think they could target, like Javon Holland, an Elijah Molden, Keith Taylor, Thomas Graham, Diamador Lenore, like Elijah Griffin, Cameron Bynum, like all these guys that played at the Pac-12 level, that I think they could target because that's a pretty rich area this year for DB talent, especially that round 2 area where you kind of look at. I kind of wonder, if we haven't heard much about that. I think they met with Holland. I think we did hear about a meeting with Javon Holland, but we haven't heard much about that this year. So I kind of wonder if that, because Juju Smith-Schuster was a surprise pick from the West Coast. If we get a surprise pick, I'd bet it would come from the Pac-12.
Yeah, Vera Tucker is a guy who seems to kind of fit all their needs, and they haven't really didn't really get a lot of buzz. I mean, I think he's probably gone before they get there at 24, but certainly is a possibility. And then they didn't really talk to him very much. So it seems like the West Coast may not be the best coast for the Steelers to be scouting in the middle of a pandemic. I think that is pretty clear.
Sure.
Any other highlights from today that you wanted to pick out specifically?
There were some things I was wondering about. Deep wide receiver class is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, that was like my number 1A question to ask. And I just felt like I wanted to kind of do more to hem in their first round pick. But yeah, I'm interested in that too.
Deep receiver class. And that was the second position he mentioned. I wonder, are they going to draft a receiver earlier than we all think again? Probably, because the Steelers draft receivers every year. That was interesting.
Maybe the surprise West Coast players like an Amon-Ra St. Brown.
He played with Juju Smith-Schuster, and if
he's there in the 4th round, they should probably take him.
Hey, I mean, listen, something else with that West Coast thing, right? Like Adrian Clem coached at UCLA.
Yes,
they probably have connections within these programs out there, just from him. And I'm certain they have enough in USC territory. Like they have players from there. And like David DeCastro played at Stanford. He probably knows people still out there. Like they probably have connections out on the West Coast to where I think maybe they can vet some of these guys. And yeah, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown would make sense. I don't know. The other thing we didn't talk about, D-line, he said was truly horrible. Makes me think they won't draft a defensive lineman this year, perhaps.
I was kind of already thinking that was a possibility. I think now it seems more like a probability.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they'll draft a D lineman. He wasn't asked about specialists. I was kind of wondering if they maybe were looking at a punter late, because they sent Danny Smith around a little bit to Max Duffy's pro day, to Presley Harvin's pro day. So I was kind of interested in that. We didn't really hear about that. Also, he said deep out.
He kind of punted on the quarterback question, which I thought was interesting. He didn't really commit one way or the other. Said, look, we have 4 guys, but 3 of them are on expiring contracts, and we could get younger. I don't know. I mean, the Josh Dobbs contract they can walk away from without much of any, injury to their salary cap. But that just seemed like a strange combination of decisions there. Like, why sign Josh Dobbs and say, well, we could still draft one? I don't know. That didn't make much sense to me.
I think they're considering it at the very least. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I think Kellen Mond seems to be the best fit there.
Yeah, I do too. They sent Canada to his pro day, so that makes sense for me. That would be Kellen Mond.
I don't know when he's going to be. I have a hard time seeing them take him with a day 2 pick.
They'd have to take him at 55.
I don't know. Like that, to me, they almost need to trade down in the first round to make a pick like that happen, to give them another day 2 pick.
Again, he said they're not going to trade up, so probably not going to be for Fields, right? Like, even with his recent stock slipping, like, there's no way he gets past New England. No way he gets past Chicago.
Washington or Chicago.
Like, no way he gets to 24. Like, there's no way. So it's not going to be him. No way Lance or Jones falls. They didn't show any interest really in Trask. They didn't show really any interest in Davis Mills. So it's probably Mond or bust, to be quite honest.
Maybe like a Jamie Newman later on, like round 5, 6-ish.
Yeah, maybe 7th round flyer on Ian Book. I don't know. That's just because they were at that Notre Dame pro day. Sam Ehlinger, I don't know.
I thought those 2 guys were probably better than Newman at the Senior Bowl, but I mean, I don't think anybody outside of, I thought Mac Jones obviously looked very good, but I thought Mond looked pretty comfortably better than the rest. Felipe Franks, I guess, maybe if you want somebody that can run a little bit.
He's going to be a converted tight end. I swear. He's going to be the next Logan Thomas. Like, I could see it.
He's a sub. Well, I mean, I don't know. If you take a 6th or 7th round pick and use it on that guy, I guess you can feel all right about it. I don't think that's not a terrible use of that pick.
Yeah, I don't know. Quarterback's position, I think it has to fall in a way to where they don't really have many good options at 55, and they would take Mond, or Mond has to fall like 80 or something within very close range of their 3rd round pick, or to their 3rd round pick to where they take him. I can't see them taking him at 55. They know they need a quarterback, but I think they'll wait.
Yeah, it seems like they got their quarterback in Dwayne Haskins and Mike Tomlin. When he responded to that question, he said, "Look, I'm excited about a 22-year-old that was considered to be a 1st round talent 2 years ago, 3 years ago." So I think that's their quarterback addition, and I have a hard time seeing a better chance of success with any of those guys we talked about than with Haskins. He's probably just as likely as any of them to turn into something for the future. So why not at least give him a year in the system and see what he's got, what they have there before they go finding somebody else to be a project too. You only have so many hours in the day. Even with COVID and Zoom meetings, especially, like, it's going to be hard enough to develop a project quarterback as it is.
Yeah, exactly. I can't see them doing that. They'll probably just wait till next year and see what they can do with Ben, obviously, on the last year of his deal. And
maybe he'll be back. I don't know. Throwing that out there.
I can't. I can't see it. I can't see it.
Well, that's good stuff, as always, Nick. And thanks for watching. We're going to be back Tuesday, Wednesday in the morning with more as we wrap up our preview of the 2021 NFL Draft. If you've got a specific question or a topic you want us to hit, leave a comment and we will. And then Thursday night we'll be live during the 1st round of the draft. You can watch the draft anywhere, but this is the only place where you're going to get live reaction to it happens from the Pittsburgh Steelers perspective, how the draft is falling for the Steelers at 24, how the teams around them, their division and the AFC are getting better with their picks. We'll have instant analysis and reaction with myself, with Nick, with Kailberger, with Mike Osti live here on the Pittsburgh Sports Live channel. So make sure to click subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. You find out when we go live on Thursday night. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. It's a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Live.